Hi guys. I don't even know what date this is anymore. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. I know things are really different right now and it can feel very overwhelming, but I thought I would just kind of keep things somewhat normal by doing this PowerPoint. So in a way, it feels as though you are in the room with me, but we're not actually physically in the room together. But I'm pretty much just going to go through the PowerPoint and kind of just lecture how I normally would. I know this has already been posted, but maybe the audio and the tone of me explaining it will be more helpful to you guys. So this week you are supposed to be reading about motivation. So hopefully we're actually opening our textbooks and actually doing the reading. But here is just the PowerPoint. So in general about motivation, so many of us are motivated by multiple things, whether it is food or success or our appearance and being liked or relationships, or it can be all of those things. So, when it comes to motivation, motivation is the need or the desire that energizes and directs behavior. So, we have a bunch of different needs. So, needs would be water, shelter, food. Desires would be money, which I'm sure a lot of us could use right now. It could be acceptance, popularity. It can be a new technology device. A new car. So, those are kind of the differences between needs and desires, and then what drives us. So just different motivation theories. Very early motivation theory is going to be called the instinct theory. This is pretty much where we do things that are not necessarily like trained or motivated by rewards. It's pretty much unlearned. So dogs marking, that is an unlearned behavior. They are motivated to do that to assert dominance. And so that's something that they're not trained to do. They just happen to do it. Okay, so instinct theory, yes, this is a boob and this is also a baby. This would make more sense to you if I had taught the development chapter first, but I didn't get a chance to do that yet, so we'll do that after we get back. And so instinct theory can explain some behaviors like, dogs marking or, babies, they naturally are going to want to root, which is them wanting to put their mouths on just their mom's breast so that way they can get food. It's the same reason why when you touch a baby's cheek, they'll naturally just like do this with their mouths because they think your food has milk and that they're basically trying to survive and feed themselves. But then the only problem with instinct theory is that it can't really explain other types of behaviors. Like, I'm sure some of you guys want to go bungee jumping or skydiving, and that's not necessarily part of our instincts. So then this theory kind of is outdated, so it kind of went away. Okay, so then we have something called a drive reduction theory. This is the idea that a physiological need, so think about all your physiological needs. It's food, water, elimination of waste, like going to the bathroom. So whenever we are starving or really thirsty or really have to go to the bathroom, we have this very aroused tension state, which is then our drive. And then because we have that drive, that is then going to motivate us to satisfy that need. And the whole point of this theory is the fact that we want to maintain homeostasis. So, homeostasis basically means balance or equilibrium. And so, our bodies, we never want to be too hungry or too full or over hydrated or underhydrated, or you also don't want to also like hold your urine or bowel movements because it's like really bad for you. And so our whole point of us having drive reduction is that we want to basically reduce this drive so then we can feel balanced and back to norm. Okay, so sometimes we're not only pushed by our needs, but some of us are also pulled by our incentives. And so that basically just means that some of us are very driven by incentives like money or French fries, especially from Del Taco, because I love Del Taco French fries, or attention. And so that sometimes will then help reduce our drives. Okay, then we have something called optimal arousal. For some people, they may not want homeostasis. Like for some of us, being like balanced and an equilibrium can be very boring. And so then they're going to want to seek constant arousal. So those of you that are really adrenaline junkies, like driving fast or roller coasters and amusement parks and skydiving and getting a tattoo and all these different things, or I can't even think, oh, trying drugs, even though none of yours are doing that. A lot of times that could be the reason why, is because of optimal arousal, that for you guys, homeostasis isn't enough. And so you guys get bored. And then so we want to do these really arousing things. Okay, the most famous or most popular theory for motivation is going to be Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have you guys seen that? There's a lot of memes going around, and even though it's not a funny thing, what they're saying is that the bottom layer right here is toilet paper, because obviously people are hoarding toilet paper right now. And so, even though it's not funny, but like it kind of is, I guess. His main theory is that in order for us to reach this very top of self-actualization, we need to fulfill this most basic need, and then we basically can move upwards. So our most basic need is physiological, which is anything that's bio-based, so hunger, thirst, elimination of waste. After we have fulfilled that, then I want to feel safe. So that means we have shelter, we find comfort in our homes, hopefully for some of us. And then once I feel safe, then I want to belong and have love. So having friends, having significant others, having our family. And then after we have that, we want to have esteem needs, which is pretty much like respect. You want to be viewed as competent. You don't want to be disrespected. And you want people to basically see you as someone that can accomplish things. And then once we have reached all the way there, then you can finally reach self-actualization. And so according to Maslow, self-actualization is like reaching your full potential. All of you guys right now, since you're such young people, you guys haven't reached that yet because you still have so much life to live. But this is the point where you would feel completely satisfied with all areas of your life. And so according to Maslow, he's saying that out of all of these, which one do you guys think that if you were not able to fulfill, it would actually create the most distress in us and the most angst? If you guessed this one, you are correct. He's pretty much saying that when we are isolated, like this whole quarantine thing right now, and we don't have our loved ones to lean on and to support us, then we can feel the most lonely, and that can be really devastating. And so that's kind of what he is saying is our motivation, hierarchy of needs. In the canyon, roll. Okay, so before I show that video is it's kind of, it's not graphic, but it's explicit. So there's no blood or anything, but have you guys seen that movie? What movie is it? I think it's 72 Hours. Is that? I can't remember. I don't remember what the movie's called, but it has oh my gosh, what's his name? I can't remember his name. But anyway, it's about the guy who went rock climbing and then didn't bring his cell phone or anybody else. And then he fell down the mountain and got his arm caught between two rocks. His real name is Aaron Ralston. And so what I want you guys to do is watch this video, and then it's pretty graphic, like the way it's speaking. It doesn't show anything, but just be prepared for that. You can always skip the video if you want. You don't have to watch it. And it's pretty much just showing you that when you're watching it, which of these needs do you feel actually got him through to the very end to survive? And ask yourselves, if that happened to you, could you be motivated, and what would motivate you to survive and cut off your arm? Or would you just say, you know, rocks, take me and die? I have no idea. In the canyon, Ralston was once again idly chipping away at the rock when his knife brushed the tip of his thumb.
It ripped part of the skin off of my thumb, kind of like the way an old blister will rip away. And so that made me curious, and I started prodding around, and I stuck the knife down in and at my thumb at that spot, and it slid in like I was sliding it into a pat of warm butter, and it went in. I couldn't feel it, of course, but it went in about a half inch, and then this hissing sound of gas, the decomposition gas is releasing from inside my arm, my hand, where they'd been building up as my hand was decomposing over those 5 days. And that threw me into a panic. It scared me. It appalled me. It was a gruesome concept that my hand was decaying while still attached to my body. And I started yanking my hand, my arm, and I was giving it everything that I had. and was twisting myself around and trying to slide my arm up and down like this. And
then, in an instant, Ralston realized what he had to do to save his life.
It came to me, this epiphany that I could break the bones, because my arm was caught so tightly that I could torque myself the other bone.
Torque, a basic principle to a former engineer like Ralston. Remember, he had made an initial attempt to amputate his arm 2 days before, only to realize there was no way his pocket knife could slice through the bones. But if he could break them, maybe he'd have a chance. He would have to snap both of the bones in his arm to make it work.
And so I slammed my body against the opposite wall. I grabbed the backside of the boulder and even got my feet up to where I was standing halfway up the wall and grabbing the backside of the rock and humping my body over it until finally that bottom bone snapped. And this pow sound went kind of echoing through the canyon. And I don't even know if I started feeling excited at that point, but I just knew the next thing that I had to do was that I had to break the other bone. And so I grabbed the bottom side of the rock and pushed and tried to sink myself down until I was pushing up to create the downward leverage on the top bone until it too made the same noise, pow, and snapped in the same spot, thankfully, right where my wrist was caught. They both broke right along here, just behind the bones of my wrist.
But now you've got to cut off the arm.
Yeah, and I said to myself, here we go, Aaron, you're in it now. And I took my knife.
Its blades were now bent and dull from days of stabbing at the rock.
At first, I still had the larger blade out, and I held it up against my arm, and I started pushing into it, and I couldn't get the knife to sink in, and so I switched over, and I pulled out the smaller blade, and with the smaller blade, then I actually started the amputation. The smaller one was still a little more sharp.
The smaller blade was just 2 inches long.
I dove into this exercise, this surgical procedure, and started cutting away.
He cut through the top layer of skin and muscle until he saw an artery.
Getting through
Only then did he realize he'd forgotten to apply the tourniquet he had fashioned days earlier from the insulated lining of his water bottle.
I put the tourniquet on, and I was bleeding down the wall, and I severed the artery. And
he cut through more muscle
through the other
and 2 more arteries, then tendon, the most difficult layer. His dull knife was unable to cut through
it, so I ended up taking the pliers side of the knife and using that to grab and twist and rip until the tendon gave way.
It was slow, painful, excruciating work. He hacked away at his arm for nearly an hour, layer by layer, until he saw what he knew would cause the most intense pain yet.
And then I was looking at the nerve, this little strand of spaghetti running through my arm. And I had to take the knife and pry it up. And even just when I touched it, it felt like the fire of sticking my arm into just a pot of liquid metal. It burned all the way up my arm, and I took it again and lifted it up. I knew it was going to hurt, and I plucked it up and did it in a motion like that, and that fire sensation redoubled and went all the way up to my shoulder. But I knew that was the hard part. And
it was only a few more moments of work
after that, and then boom, and I wasn't even attached anymore, and I fell down like this, and I was free.
You were reborn.
It was the happiest moment of my life. And it's funny to think about it being. There will never be a more powerful experience for me. It was absolutely the greatest feeling to be given the chance to get out of here. Looking down canyon, I knew I had a hell of a trip left, but at least I was not going to die right here, and the power of that was astonishing.
That was pretty intense. So if you're thinking about his story, if you actually read about it, he basically said that the reason that he was able to be motivated to cut off his arm was that he had pictured himself in the future being married with having kids. And so in a way, belongingness and love needs is actually what helped drive him to do what he needed to do to survive. So I don't know if we could all do that. Some of us could, some of us couldn't. But this is pretty much a very popular idea of our needs is what is the most basic needs we have? And then from that point on, how do we move forward? And then how do we then get to self-actualization? Okay, now moving on to hunger motivation. So how many of you guys are driven lots by hunger? If I was to bribe you guys with, food every morning, would that drive you guys more to be on time for school? Would it drive you more to study more, to read more? If some of you guys are like, meh, food is whatever, then that's probably not going to be you. But some of us are very much driven by hunger. Even with this whole coronavirus thing, I mean, like you can tell people are really afraid of going hungry. And a lot of our grocery stores are being, everyone's hoarding and there's like nothing in the stores. Like all the frozen food's gone, all the meat is gone, all the bread is gone. And so a lot of people are very much hunger driven. Okay, so when it comes to hunger motivation, hunger is both physiological and psychological. Oops, that thing's in the way. So for some of us, physiological, like we just eat to live. We just eat to live. So you only just eat to maintain your body and to survive. Some of us are more psychological with food. We are basically people that we live to eat. Like we dream about food, we talk about food, we love Googling about food. And so for us, everyone's different. Okay, so when it comes to body chemistry, glucose is essentially sugar. And so the hormone insulin converts glucose into fat. And so we all need glucose. And when glucose levels drop, that's how we know that we are hungry. And so for a lot of us, when we don't have enough food, we might get headaches or hangry. Those of you that get really irritable. For some of us, we get quiet, or you might get a stomach ache. And so that basically is your body telling you that, hey, you need food. Okay, so then the part of the brain that deals with hunger is going to be the hypothalamus, which should be a review because we've covered that chapter. And there's actually two parts of the hypothalamus that helps control eating. So the lateral hypothalamus is what actually brings on hunger. So this is the part of your brain that if I was to tap this part of your brain, you would then become hungry, even if you were super stuffed. So people have said that people that have weight issues or maybe they are obese, that they maybe have a overactive lateral hypothalamus that basically just keeps having them eat and eat. And so the part of your brain that says, okay, hey, stop, that's enough, isn't really quite working that well. And then if I was to lesion or take away this part of the brain, then a starving animal would have no interest in food because this part of your brain is what brings on hunger. Okay, then we have the ventral medial hypothalamus. So this is the part of your brain that says, hey, I'm done eating, and it depresses hunger. So this one, if I was to tap this part of your brain, you would then stop eating. So what would happen if I was to take out this part of your brain? You would then become kind of obese or overweight because you would have nothing in your brain that tells you, hey, stop. So the other one, lateral hypothalamus tells you, hey, keep eating. This one, ventral medial, tells you, hey, stop eating. Okay, so then psychology of hunger. For a lot of people, hunger can be very external. So if you see this picture and you're like, ooh, Doritos, now I'm hungry and I want that, you probably are very driven by pictures of food. Or when someone else is eating something, you get hungry, then you are more external based. For some of you, you're looking at this picture, you're like, meh, whatever. Then for you, food doesn't tend to be external. Okay. So then we have taste preferences. Food tastes better and we chew less when we are really hungry. Basically meaning we shove everything into our mouths when we're starving, or like, and then you basically, it's like we don't even really taste the food because we're just starving and we just like shove it in there. And then food actually tastes worse and we chew more, like we slow down and was like, oh, I'm so full, towards the end of the meal. So all of us have different signs of fullness. For some of us, it could be like the shifting of our weight and then like moving our pants or wearing stretchy pants. For some of you, it's pushing away the plate. For some of you, it's like the nostril flare of like I'm so full. So we all have different signs of fullness. Okay, then when it comes to just culture and taste, how many of you guys are really open to trying new foods? What's the weirdest food you've ever tasted? And then half of you in here, how many of you guys are super picky about food and then you don't try anything new? And we talked about this in our other chapters of like if it looks weird, if it smells weird, you're not going to eat it. Whereas some of you guys might actually eat things that other cultures might not be comfortable with. So I know just coming from the Asian culture, like we eat a lot of really weird things that to me are normal, but to other people are like disgusting. And so it just really depends on your culture and your taste. Okay, so now on to eating disorders. So these are serious disorders. We'll talk more about these two in our abnormal psych chapter. But when it comes to hunger, like it said in the beginning of the chapter, hunger is both physiological and psychological. So a lot of eating disorders are very psychological, which then leads to physiological symptoms. And so we have three main eating disorders. The first one is anorexia nervosa. It's pretty much an eating disorder in which the person becomes significantly underweight. And so this person, if you notice anyone that gets really thin very quickly, they probably might have an eating disorder. And so this one is pretty easy to catch because you are going to have people that are incredibly, incredibly thin. They're going to be way below their BMI and their normal body weight for their height, their age, and their gender. And so a lot of times too, side effects of anorexia nervosa is that their hair and their nails are going to get really brittle. Sometimes their skin will also kind of turn like a yellowish color because they don't have the nutrients. Their system also becomes really weak, so it's hard for them to fight off like diseases. And so that can a lot of times be the side effects. And so if you know anyone that is showing signs of an eating disorder, please reach out. Try to support them and get them help. A lot of times, if it's a severe eating disorder, just regular talk therapy isn't enough. They need to be in treatment, like at a facility to actually help change the way they are seeing their bodies and their mindset and how they're eating as well. And I'll show you guys a video of this at the end. Okay, another disorder that is also part of eating disorders is bulimia nervosa. So this is one that's characterized by overeating really high calorie foods and then vomiting the food later. And so this is called binge and purging. And so a lot of times what they'll do is they will, like they'll go home and then they'll binge, like they'll have a whole Pepe's burrito and then a whole pizza and then ice cream, and they just eat all of it and then they feel guilty and then they end up vomiting or purging it back up. They can also use laxatives, which basically makes you go to the bathroom. They can also excessively exercise. This one is actually a little bit harder to catch than anorexia because a lot of times people with bulimia maintain the same weight. Even though they're purging food up, they still are consuming some calories. And so this one can be kind of hard to catch. But any guesses as to who normally will find out about them when they are trying to hide it? Any guesses? Any shout outs? Think about yourself. Usually it's going to be a dentist because when you are purging and vomiting, it's going to then take off the enamel of your teeth. And so a lot of times young teens will go to the dentist and the dentist will inform the parents, hey, I think your son or daughter might have an eating disorder because the structures of their teeth are not the same. And so that's something just to be mindful about as well. Okay, the third eating disorder, which I don't have a slide for, it's called binge binge eating disorder. So bed, I guess. So binge eating disorder is pretty much where you'll binge a lot of food, but you won't vomit it up. You'll just feel really guilty and hate yourself. So if you've ever gone home and like shoved food in your face and then you felt so bad about yourself and you're like, ugh, I'm so gross, I'm so ugly, I can't believe I just ate that. If you do that a few times a week, that is then now considered binge eating disorder. So you have to have a lot of the guilt and the shame that comes with it. You don't have the purging part, but you definitely have the I hate myself part of it. Okay, so here's a video of someone that has anorexia nervosa. She's super, super thin. If you look at her arms and her legs, they're just so small, and she just looks super fragile. Just kidding. I don't have the video. I thought I had the video in the PowerPoint. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is.
Isabel Caro is as shocking a poster girl as you will ever see. Last month, the anorexic woman who weighs less than 70 pounds appeared on billboards in Milan, the fashion center of Italy. Looking at her made us wonder if she would actually survive. CBS News correspondent Sheila McVicker went to Paris to learn more about her.
You remember the picture. The shocking, haunting gaze of an anorexic. Hard to look at, hard to look away from. It was part of an Italian attempt to raise awareness of the disease in the fashion industry. Isabel Caro was the model. She told us she has no regrets. She posed for the campaign.
I've been anorexic since I was 13. I said if I can put my years of suffering to use, then it would not have been pointless. I hope the message got through. I know there has been a lot of criticism because it's a shocking photo, and I wanted to shock. It's really a warning that this is a serious illness.
But it's too painful now for Isabel to see that picture.
I say to myself, that's horrible, horrible.
Are you worried that young girls suffering from anorexia might see that picture of you and think, I have to lose more, I have to lose more. Look at how beautiful she is like that. I must lose more.
I don't think so. I hope not. To see my tailbone like an open wound, I show myself as I am. I'm not beautiful, my hair is ruined, and I know I will never have long hair again. I've lost several teeth, my skin is dry, my breasts have fallen. No young girl wants to look like a skeleton. It's horrible. It's ugliness. You couldn't believe anyone would want to look like that. I don't think there is any question about it.
At 5 feet and now 66 pounds, 25-year-old Isabel has a body mass index under 14. The lowest healthy adult BMI is 18.5. She has weighed even less. Her anorexia the result of a dreadful childhood.
This is when I was 55 pounds. It's actually very painful to look at these photos again.
When did you realize that this disease, this illness, could kill you?
It was when I went into a coma about a year and a half ago, and really up to then I didn't realize. I saw death coming for me. I saw what all those people describe when they survive an accident, when they really come close to dying. At that stage I freaked out. I was so afraid that I took hold of myself, and I said I have to do something, because I won't have a second chance. I really wanted to live. I really wanted to fight.
Isabel left her family and moved to the south of France. She's found a doctor who specializes in treating eating disorders. She sees a psychotherapist, has her blood and heart checked regularly. And slowly, slowly, she has begun to eat. How difficult was it to literally begin to eat again?
My stomach rejected everything, so it was very, very hard. I had to get used to eating again, little bites and lots of liquids.
Isabel says she loves Japanese food.
I'll have the seaweed salad, and definitely the miso soup, because it's got lots of salt in it.
And for lunch, ordered soup and seaweed and a plate of sashimi, that's raw sliced fish. A whole cup of tea is sometimes just too much. She cradles the cup for warmth. Pasta and rice are still too heavy. She never uses olive oil. But there is progress.
I've put on weight since the campaign photo was taken in April. I've gained more than 4 pounds, and I now weigh 32 kilos.
And that's a big success. You're 32 kilos now. That's about 66, 67 pounds. And that's a big success.
Oui, c'est certainement une grande Yes, it's definitely a big success. I haven't put on any weight since I was a teenager. I was hospitalized several times and fattened up, but at the time I wasn't given any psychiatric help. So 1 week later, I'd lose the weight all over again.
Critics say that Isabel was too sick and not mentally competent to be able to agree to participate in the anti-anorexia campaign. She says it has helped her. Did your doctors think it was a good idea?
I didn't really talk about it beforehand, but when he saw it, he said it would give me motivation to get better, to give me a project, and that was very good.
For the first time in a long time, Isabel is beginning to have enough strength to believe she has a future. But there is still a long way to go. Tell me about the freckles on your face. Do you paint the freckles on your face?
I do have freckles naturally, but I use makeup to accentuate them because I like to bring out my eyes. Because if someone is looking at my eyes, they are not looking at the rest of me.
Sheila McVicker, CBS News, Paris.
Okay, so that is hunger motivation. Alrighty, we have 2 more. This is now going to be, okay, sorry, just kidding. I totally forgot we had these slides. So when you're talking about eating disorders, they want to know, is it cultural? And it just depends. And so I think society keeps changing. I'm sure some of your guys' grandparents and parents might say, like, oh, you need to eat more. Whereas in our culture today, I don't think skinny is the ideal anymore. I think being fit is the ideal. So that's kind of a nice change. Whereas in the past, I used to be like, you have to be skinny, you have to be thin to be beautiful. And that's totally not the case. And then back in the old days, whenever people were on the heavier side, that actually was a sign of wealth. And so as we've gone through different decades, it just has changed a lot. And then when it comes to body image, they did a survey for women and they asked women, what was your ideal? What did you think you want? What do you think men want? And so on a scale of 1 through 5, 5 being the heaviest, women's ideal was under half. And then what they believed men actually preferred was also under half. Well, not under half, but like on the lower end. And then what men actually preferred was a lot higher than what women actually thought men wanted. And then women tend to view themselves at a heavier range than what they really are sometimes. Okay, moving on to sexual motivation. So this is kind of like sex education. Hopefully you guys got some of this in your health classes, but this is all pretty much in your textbook. So it is the psychology of sexual motivation. Okay, so sex, 1, is natural. And so we as humans, we are motivated to have sex, whether it's now or later. And so I'm not really going to be here to be the one that tells you have to wait till marriage, you have to wait till you're in love. That's not really where I'm coming from. I'm more just coming from a place of safety of, if you are going to engage in sexual acts with someone else, just to make sure that you guys are keeping yourselves safe, make sure your partner is safe, and just don't, sometimes it can be really hard for us to do things just because it feels great in the moment and not really think about the consequences. But sex is such an important thing, and it's supposed to be very intimate and very special. And so I think that's why a lot of adults would say, please wait until you're in love and you're married. But I understand that may not be the case. So if you are going to engage in anything, just please protect yourselves. And that is like my main push for this lecture. So okay, your first person is Alfred Kinsey. So he's kind of like the father of sex motivation. And so what he wanted to know was he wanted to talk about a topic that wasn't really talked about. And so he basically did interviews with 18,000 people in the early 1950s. So obviously a lot of this data must be changed now because, it's 2020 and things have progressed and changed over time. And so even back then, though, in the 1950s, which was kind of more of a conservative era, people had reported that most men and half of all women have premarital sex, meaning that they have sex before marriage. And then almost all men and all women masturbate. I think in like our society today, I think we just assume that men do, but women do as well, and that's actually fairly common and normal. And then they had said that women who had orgasms while masturbating were more likely to report having orgasms after marriage. And this isn't me being like, oh my gosh, women, you have to go out there and masturbate. Not that at all. The report is just basically saying that if women were more comfortable with their bodies, then they were able to better help their partners also know their bodies as well. Okay, so then the physiology of sex. So then in the 1960s, William Masters and Virginia Johnson, they were pretty much like, you know what, interviews are fine, but as we all know, interviews and surveys people can lie, people can exaggerate. So they wanted to actually go and observe it in the actual lab. And so they had 382 females and 312 males come in, and they just basically watched over 10,000 sex cycles. So whether that was one-on-one or with two people or it was just an individual, they basically watched the cycle of an orgasm. And I don't think it's weird to be the person doing this study. I almost think it's kind of more odd being the volunteer of going in there and being like, hey, like watch me have sex, I guess. But hey, it's for science and psychology. And so it worked out because now we know all these cool things. Okay, so what she discovered and he discovered was that there's actually a 4-step cycle of what happens when you're going through a sexual response. And so the first cycle is the excitement phase. So this is pretty much where you're like making out, it's getting a little hot and heavy, you're enjoying it. So genitals are going to become engorged in both men and women, and then women will then start to lubricate. So after you've passed the excitement phase, you are now in the plateau phase. So this is where like excitement is like peaking. You might start breathing really heavy. Your pulse is going to increase. So the tip of the penis may exhibit seminal fluid or like pre-semen. And then for girls, they're going to feel as though like an orgasm is going to feel very much present or like about to happen. And so what I always try to encourage in this section right here is that some people will say, well, you know, we're not actually having sex. We're just rolling around naked. Whatever. People do whatever they want to do, right? The only issue with that is that if there is pre-semen in a male and it is like anywhere near the vagina, it's a very low possibility, but hey, it's possible, is that you can still get pregnant even without penetration. But if there's rubbing and there's pre-semen around the area, a woman can still get pregnant. So just be really mindful of that and be really careful. Okay, then you have the orgasm phase. So this is where, this is essentially like, why people have sex sometimes. It's pretty much we're going to have muscle contractions all over the body. This part's really interesting. So a woman's contractions actually help propel sperm and position uterus to increase the chances of conception. Basically what that means is that, ladies, your bodies, when you orgasm, it is like prepared to make babies. And so I understand that everyone's like, oh, well, we can use condoms or birth control, all of that. I don't know if you guys know this, but birth control and condoms, none of them are 100% effective. So ideally you would use both. I think condoms has like a 96, 97%, rate. And then I think birth control has about like 98, which is much better. So doing both would be great, but being on birth control does not protect you from STDs. So again, if you are not looking to have a baby anytime soon, definitely protect yourselves if you are going to engage in sexual activity. And then the last phase is the resolution phase. This is pretty much where everything is going to slow down. Men, not women though, actually enter this refractory period where they pretty much just have to rest, essentially recharge before they can have another orgasm. Whereas women, they don't have to enter this phase. They can have multiple orgasms. So that is the cycle of sex. Okay, so then the psychology of sex, so that was all bio and physiological. So now onto psychology. Only some people are externals when it comes to hunger, but all people are externals when it comes to sex. What that means is that it doesn't necessarily mean that we are all turned on by images of sex, but all of us become aroused. So have you guys ever been in the room and watched a sex scene with your parents? Like how awkward is that? You know, how awkward is it when we're like with other people and a sex scene or a nude scene comes on? Like, it makes us feel kind of weird, because it's supposed to be kind of private and like our bodies feel weird. And so that's actually really normal. It's because you may not be like turned on, but your body does go through this natural like arousal state. And so that's why it's awkward to watch any sort of sex scene with someone that isn't, you know, like your partner. And so that's why when you and your parents watch a sex scene together, it is oh so fun, right? Okay, then can external sexual stimuli have adverse effects? So this is pretty much talking about like pornography and any movies that talks about, you know, kidnapping women and doing things to them. And so it's pretty much just saying that X-rated films can actually diminish a person's satisfaction with their actual partner. And so I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but pornography addiction is one of the most common addictions that we're seeing in the therapy field. It's not just drugs and prescription medications; those are for sure addictions. But we're getting a lot of pornography addictions, and it is like ruining marriages and relationships, because if you are watching pornography too often, especially at your guys' age, is starting so young, and then you are orgasming to these images, that's not real life. And so when you are then with a real life partner and they don't look like those people or do what those people do, it can be really hard for people to reach an orgasm, which then will lead to dissatisfaction in their relationships. And so that can be really hard. In addition, if you're just like hiding out in your room by yourselves with your phone or computer, you know, watching pornography and having orgasms, it really, again, we talk about this all the time in class, you know, like social media is like ruining lives, or our phone, but it prevents people from going out there and like meeting real people. So then people become more isolated and more alone and like socially awkward and not having these, experiences of actually talking to people and dating face to face. So, because they're getting their pleasure from an internet source. So, just be really mindful, be really careful. Everything that you focus your brain on, you are essentially rewiring your brain. So, if you want to be a really healthy partner for someone in the future, watching pornography right now is not going to help you with that at all. Okay, again, images inside of our heads. So can fantasies lead to orgasms? Yes. So our minds are really powerful, and so if you have a sex dream, that's normal at your guys' age. That can lead to an orgasm while sleeping. Also, again, like watching pornography and those kinds of things, they can be really powerful for our brains, and then that can then ultimately affect our physiological selves. So mind and body go together. Okay, then adolescent sexual culture. And so this question, this is old too, data, but do you think it is or is not morally wrong for a couple to have a baby if they are not married? And so I think nowadays the studies are basically showing that more people are okay with that. If you're looking at this chart, it looks like a lot of the Eastern cultures are very much like, no, that's wrong. And then apparently Iceland doesn't care. But it does seem like it's becoming less conservative as we're progressing in society, and I think there's just a lot more single parent homes nowadays, and that can be for various different reasons. Okay, this is a condom, and he's happy because he wants you to use it if you're going to be having sex. Just kidding. But when you're looking at statistics about sexual culture, only 1/3 of sexually active male teens use condoms. Like, that is an incredibly low amount. And so the question is why? How come, you know, teenagers and other males, why are they not protecting themselves? So some of the studies have shown, one, ignorance. A lot of times people just say, hey, like, what's going to happen? It's not going to happen to me, right? Like, why do I need to use something to protect myself? I'm not going to catch that. I'm not going to get that, yada, yada. For some people, it can be guilt around sex. For some, the thought of actually buying contraceptions means that they're actually now having sex, and they can feel a lot of guilt for that. So then they just rather just, you know, like, out of sight, out of mind. I'm not buying it, which basically means I'm not really doing it, even though I am. But, you know, people do a lot of things to make themselves feel better mentally. So that could be one. No communication. So the partners aren't even talking about it. They're just in the heat of the moment, and maybe they're embarrassed. My philosophy is, if you cannot talk openly about sex, that means you are not mature enough to have sex. Like, if you cannot walk into a store and buy contraceptions without being embarrassed, if you cannot talk to your partner openly about sex and what you like, what you don't like, how are we going to protect ourselves, do we want to get tested, do you not want to get tested, then in my opinion, you're not mature enough yet to engage in this act, because there's so many consequences that come with this. This experience, that if you're not ready to even talk about it, then you're probably not yet ready to actually do it. And so that's just kind of, be mindful of that. If you feel like you're mature enough, then okay, then be prepared for all of the different consequences that may come. Okay, alcohol use. So again, movies ruin everything. Even though I love movies. But whenever you see people getting drunk in movies and then having sex, like in real life, that's never a good mix, because alcohol use actually decreases sexual, what's the word? Satisfaction, and performance. And so you don't ever want to mix sex with alcohol. Like, if you're going to drink, then just drink. If you're going to have sex, then just have sex. Like, if you mix the two, nothing really good comes from that. Also, the mass media norms, they never really they never like actually go through the process of like, okay, we are going to have this like really mature conversation about what sex is going to look like. What are we going to do? Let's go get tested together. Let's go buy condoms. It's just like in the movies, they just do it. Like, clothes come off and they're just having sex. And so a lot of times that gives the wrong perception of that experience to people that haven't had it. Also, other things like, oh, it feels better without the condom, blah, blah, blah. But aside from it feeling better without the condom, it's not going to feel real good if you end up getting pregnant or having an STD. So just, food for thought. Also, there are some STDs like gonorrhea and what's the other one? Chlamydia, where you can actually have symptoms without showing them for like months or weeks. And so just be mindful of who you are sharing your bodies with. Do you know where they have been as well? And are they also being careful with their bodies? So that is all the sexual motivation. Okay, now on to sexual orientation. So when it comes to sexual orientation, everyone has their own perspective, right? Some of you guys in here might feel as though, being gay is a choice. Some of you guys may feel like you were born that way. So I'm just coming from a very psychological perspective of like what studies have shown. And so for you guys, I would just encourage you to do your own research and be just really mindful of like what studies you're seeing. So sexual orientation is an enduring sexual attraction towards members of one's own gender or of the other gender. I know nowadays there's, I'm sorry, I can't even think of like the politically right word. I think it's pansexual. I'm so sorry if I don't have the right word. You guys please help educate me. But it's pretty much where like gender doesn't matter. Like you don't see gender. And so that is a form of orientation nowadays as well. Okay, so how is sexual orientation determined? So currently, there is no evidence that sexuality is socially determined. So what that means is that the whole like you choose to be gay thing, or the whole issue why this even came up to was that there were gay parents that wanted to adopt babies, and people were basically saying, well, no, you shouldn't be allowed to adopt babies because you're gay, which means you're going to turn your baby gay. Okay, no. None of that is true. There's been no studies that have shown that. So if it's not socially determined, then studies are leaning then towards more biologically determined. So kind of more on the genetic side rather than obviously the social side. So when it comes to brain development, Simon LeVay has discovered that there is a cluster of cells in the hypothalamus that is larger in heterosexual men than in heterosexual women or homosexual men. So then again, it's kind of leaning towards more of a biological factor rather than a social one, because it's going to be brain development, and that there's just a little bit difference in how the brain looks and is developed in different types of sexualities. So that is going to then lead towards more the nature debate versus the nurture debate. Also, when it comes to genetics, if one identical twin is homosexual, then the other twin has a 50% chance of also being gay, which again then leads towards more the nature genetics argument rather than the social argument. Alrighty, so last part of motivation. So Achievement motivation, this is this is the shorter one compared to everything else. So achievement motivation is the desire for significant accomplishments, for mastery of things, people, or ideas, for attaining a high standard. So all of these people on here obviously have achieved a lot of great things. I know for some of you guys right now, you feel unmotivated. My seniors after spring break usually have no motivation, so it's senioritis. And so the idea is, where does achievement motivation come from? How do we promote more of it if we're lacking it? And like, what is it anyway? So according to studies, achievement motivation, they're saying that people who have low achievement motivation prefer very easy or very difficult tasks. So there's just like here to here. So it's like a huge range, nothing kind of in the middle. And so the reasoning for that, some people are saying, is that if I have low achievement motivation, I would then prefer an easy task because then I can accomplish it. And then I can like pat myself on the back and go, yay, me. But if it's a very difficult task, if I don't achieve it, it's not a big deal because I already knew it was really difficult. But if I can achieve it, then I'm pretty awesome. So failure is unlikely and not very embarrassing. But for a lot of us who are high achieving, I'm sure a lot of you in here are high achieving, we actually prefer moderately to difficult tasks. Because if you've ever been in a class where you were just so bored because the class was so easy, you probably have a higher achievement motivation. Any of you that take, higher level classes like AP, IB, honors, or you also play a sport and also you have a job and you also are doing well in school, like that is a high achiever because those are things that are pushing you to be better. And then you like average or below average isn't acceptable for you. So a lot of times, people that are high achieving will pick moderately difficult tasks because then it makes them feel good also when they achieve it because it's their skills and their talent that is essentially getting them to accomplish all these goals. Okay, so then why are some people highly motivated while others are not? So there are both emotional and cognitive roots. So a lot of times children learn to associate achievement with positive emotions. Like how many of you guys have ever won something and you felt really good about yourself? You're like, yeah, I did that. Or you got an A and it's like, yay. Or you won a trophy and you're like, woohoo, me. So a lot of times when we are successful, like we feel very good about ourselves and we like that emotion. So then we continue to then try to achieve so then we can continue to feel good. A lot of times people, or children especially, are going to associate achievement with expectations, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, which I'll go over in the next slides. So maybe for you guys, your parents have high expectations for you and you want to reach them. And if you reach them, it makes them happy, which then makes you happy. Like that would be a good thing. For some of you guys, you do it for your own satisfaction of wanting to be successful. For some of you guys, you literally do it because you get money. I have no idea. Or you get a sticker for doing well. So there's so many different reasons as to why we continue to work really hard and to play our sports, our musical instruments, participate in activities, have a job, and do well, just to get up every morning just to come to school. A lot of times these structures are put in place by parents and teachers. And so for every teacher, every parent, it's different. Some of you guys might have a system in place where you guys get money or you get a good job or you get praise or you get an I love you. And depending on who the person is, whatever drives you, whatever is driving you guys to wake up every morning and come to school and to do well, that is your motivation. Whether it's making your parents proud, whether it is getting into a good college, so then you can get a good job and then you can make money and then provide for your future family one day, whatever it is, hold on to those things because that's what's ultimately going to drive you to a place where you can be successful. Okay, so then intrinsic motivation. So this is like inside. So this is basically you have a desire to perform for its own sake. You want to be successful for your own self. It's not because of money. It's not because of stickers. It's not because of food. It's not because of yelling or not being yelled at, but you simply have this internal drive to do really well. Okay, the opposite of this is extrinsic. It's pretty much where you do what you need to do because you either get a reward like money or praise, or you are afraid of your parents or the system and you don't want to get punished or get detention or get yelled at. So between the two, which one is obviously the better one? The answer is This one, good, because you need to have your own sense of motivation, because at some point, if you're being rewarded with something, that might go away. And so if the reward goes away, then the motivation goes away. So we really need to kind of dig deep and find our own intrinsic motivation to be successful. So here's an example. So mom, I'll give you $5 for every A. That is a reward. That's very extrinsic. Child says, as long as she pays, I'll study. So that means once the money goes away, he's probably going to stop studying. Or it can be, your grades were great. Let's celebrate with going out for dinner. The child's like, oh, I love doing well. Like, yes, this is also reward like dinner and praise, but you can also tell the kid loves the feeling of doing well. So then it's going to be more intrinsic. So even without the dinner and the praise, this child is going to continue to strive and be successful. Alrighty, everyone. So that is the whole lecture on motivation. I know I went through a lot. It was theories of motivation, hunger motivation, sexual motivation, and achievement motivation. And so our next lecture will be on emotions. So emotions and motivations go very nicely together. I hope you guys are having a great day, and I will see you soon.